Hey everybody, Kai Savas here. Welcome to a brand new film music media conversation. I'm here with composers Max Sarouge and Alfie Godfrey. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It's so great to talk to you both.
Hi,
Thank you.
thank you. It's been a while. Glad to be back chatting with you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is my first time with you, but as I was saying before we just hit record, it's a big honor because I've been listening to these interviews a long time, even
yeah.
before I got my first ever job in this business. So, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I'm so excited to get to talk to both of you. So yeah, to start, we're going to jump right into Mission Impossible. I know that's what we're here to talk about, but before we jump in, I like to ask this question just to, get a sense of where people coming from. I use this kind of as just a way to kick off our chat, and you can take this, and we can go back and forth. And Max, I might have asked you this last time we chatted, but I'm going to ask it to you again, see if the answer is the same because it changes, I think, every day. But so yeah, for both of you, we'll start with Alfie first. But Alfie, as a composer, as a musician, as a human being, as a musical storyteller, what does music mean to you?
Hmm. What does it mean to me? I mean, I've always felt very lucky that I've had a very strong sense of purpose and I've known exactly what it is I want to do. And kind of finding film music really brought together a lot of loose ends I had in musical interest. I was in bands and I was in choirs and I loved classical music and I loved musicals and I learnt the piano and um, but again I was a bit kind of musically homeless, or the same way someone says politically homeless. They don't really
Yeah.
know where to put their energy. And then weirdly, I went on a school trip and went into a studio in this beautiful school in the English countryside, and in there was Harry Gregson Williams. He was teaching there, and I think he spoke to me for about 20 minutes. I was 17 years old, and that was kind of the point where I realised this job exists, and actually, you know, my kind of jack of all trades but master of none aspect
Yeah.
of my interest in music would come together. And that's kind of really where I found my work ethic, and you know what it means to me kind of means everything to me. I live in this kind of community in East London. I've got lots of musicians in this building I'm speaking to you from now. I've got DJs and rock bands. I've got rock producers. I've got a violinist over the hallway. Lots of people come and go, and yeah, it's very much part of the culture here in London. It's almost too hard. It's almost hard to keep up. There is so much to do and so much to see, and it's very hard to keep your finger on the pulse, especially when you work on films like Mission Impossible and don't see the daylight for a few months. So, um, it's everything. And there's music for play, where you go and see live music and enjoy music with your friends, music community. You actually create music with people, and then there's music for work, which is, you listen, you're doing your homework, you're applying techniques, you're learning techniques. So that's kind of, I think, yeah, to answer your question, everything.
Yeah.
And those are the two main ways I kind of use music in my life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer, Max. For you, what does music mean to you as a human, as a storyteller, as a musician, as a composer?
I just went on a walk and I thought not deeply about that, but that thought briefly crossed my mind. And I think for me, at least at this moment, it's more about a fascination of why does music work?
Yeah.
It's so mysterious and it can affect different ages in different ways. And when you're young, it affects you in a certain way that's more emotional. But I think as you get a little older, I'm starting to think, God, how can I make music that affects people as they get even older? And what I love about
Mm.
film music and film is that it puts you, the audience member, in a place where they're should be ushered into feeling emotions that they might not feel in their everyday life. In Mission Impossible, for example, a certain excitement about adventure, a trepidation, maybe falling in love again. And to create music to put people in that emotional headspace, that to me that's what drives me, at least today, that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel music is deeply mechanical, and I love thinking about God, how do I make more of this?
Yeah, I mean it is a strange concept because like you don't even question it. When you start watching
Mm.
movies and you're little, you start watching, it's
Yes.
just like, oh yeah, that's there. It's like this, I grew up, I'm a 90s baby, so I grew up watching Jurassic Park or Lion King and stuff like that, and you
Yes.
just see the music working. I mean, you're not even But you go out in the world, and it wouldn't make sense to have, your speaker playing your score as you're walking down the street. But it
Mm.
works when you're telling a story, and it's just like this intent.
Hmm.
And when it's gone, you notice it.
Mhm.
When
Yes.
it's there, you kind of
Yeah.
don't, and it's feeling all those emotions. And yeah, absolutely, that's a great way of putting it. But before we jump into Mission Impossible, I'm curious about your two history. Like, talk to me. When did you first meet? What were your first impressions of each other? And I guess what was the project that brought you together originally? I'm sure it was it Lauren that brought you both together, working together? And what was it like? And did you ever foresee yourself co-composing one of the biggest franchises of all time?
I
um,
would. Yeah, go
you
ahead,
go for
Alfie.
it. No, no, you,
No,
you,
no.
you.
Sure. I mean, yeah, when you go to a place like remote, we're all musicians. We all have different paths, we all have different educations, we all have different upbringings. And I think very quickly you realize when you work for someone like Lauren, who has this incredible career and he's a great person both inside and outside the studio, you are forced to be on your best behavior and on your best game as well. So you quickly just get along because you're on the team, you're working on a project together. It's exciting, it's
Yeah.
thrilling, it's fast paced, and it just you just become a really good working team. And did I think that I expect we'd be working on something like Mission Possible? No, but I'm not surprised because when you're brought up in this great environment, look, I've co-scored with Stefan too many times, and when I first met him, I did not expect that. But that's the cool part about being in this industry is you get teamed up with people that you didn't expect, and then you're learning things from people, and it's very exciting.
Mm.
Yeah. Alfie, how about you? Do you remember first meeting Max and
I don't remember the first, but I think I remember the second because
Oh God.
um,
oh geez.
because I remember I during the Christmas break of my second year of university, I did the Zimmer internship at Remote, and it was 5 weeks, and it was the best 5 weeks of my life. And then I came back. I said, right, I've got to get back in LA and get back to that campus because I feel a kind of way in there. There is,
Yeah.
unlike trying to be a pop star, you can't intern to be a pop star, but luckily you can intern to kind of get a job in writing for film scores and around film scores. And I remember I came back and I was interning for Henry Jackman. And on my first day, they said, Henry is on holiday. There is nothing to do. So why don't you go and try and have a sit-in somewhere? And I knocked on Max's door and I said, hey. And he went, oh yeah, Lorne's next door. And then I went over to Lorne's door and I said, oh, can I come in for a sit-in? Which is quite tenacious, just randomly knocking on his door.
Yeah.
But because it was Lorne, he looked at me and went, yeah, sure, come in. And then that was actually the start of getting to know them all. And yeah, as Max said, I remember that very moment I was talking about, they were working on Six Underground. And Lorne and Stefan and Max were going through the film. And I remember watching Stefan and Max thinking, whoa, these guys are sharp. Because they were just on the computers, they were picking all the bits of music, they were going through checking the fixes of Lorne. It was quick and it was working at like 100 miles an hour. And I went, okay, this is like, this team is sharp. And it's right, you have to work very effectively, very quickly. You have to be able to keep up with the incredibly efficient and fickle process of a post-production, of the post-production process on a film, and you have to be a part of that and match the level of, the Jerry Bruckheimer team or whatever team it is you're working with. And yeah, working there, it was the best school anyone could ask for. Max will remember, we did everything from BBC dramas to huge budget Jerry Bruckheimer films to a Super Bowl commercial, to video games. Lorne didn't really he didn't really see things as high budget or low budget. It's just, did he want to do it? And there was no, there was no snobbery there. We did it all, and we learned so much in so many different ways.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking before we hit record, but yeah, Lauren was so generous, and he was the first person to let me film in his studio. I'm just like, hey, I have a camera. Can I just drop by remote and just film us talking? He's like, yeah, sure, come on by. And he was the first first video interview I ever did on Film Music Media. It was we were Terminator Genesis. He brought up sequences and played them, and I didn't know
Yeah,
what the hell I was doing. I was just propping camera up. I didn't have like the right gear or anything, but he was just like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's just do it." And then here we are,
yeah,
however many years
Wow,
later, I'm still doing these video interviews now. So it's been, yeah.
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
So let's jump right into Mission Impossible. So talk to me, so of course we know Lauren, worked on the past couple with Fallout and kind of moving forward. And you guys have experience with Lauren and everything. So when did you hear that like you guys might be up for taking the baton, and were you guys nervous? Were you guys excited? What was the kind of mood in the room when you're like, no, you guys are up, and that's a big tall order to get. Do you guys remember the motions going through, and what were those first discussions with McQuarrie and Cruz about music and how you're going to kind of tie this whole thing together?
Yeah, so basically, Lauren recommended us since we had worked on some of the past films, and including Top Gun, and Alfie and I both pitched as well. So I would say I got word in early 2024 that there were some discussions going on, and I thought, they're just being polite. This isn't a real inquiry. It's not going to work. And then I got called in to talk with Randy Spenlove at Paramount. And I walked in, he's so casual, makes you feel comfortable. And we talked, and he said, so they're looking at some different people. And I thought, it's just polite. And he said, why don't you write a pitch? I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. So I did it. And then a few weeks later, heard that McHugh wanted to chat. And I thought, oh, okay. I mean, I'm sure again, it's just a light chat. Probably nothing will come of it. And spoke with him for 90 minutes. And then I heard a month later, as I was walking in to go see Star Wars on May 5th, because they did a re-release.
Yeah.
And then I got the call from Randy that Alfie and I would be co-scoring it, and that I had to move to London basically immediately. And I was like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? This can't, this, I don't know about this. And it was incredibly exciting and very nerve-wracking. Yeah, one very thrilling times for sure. How about you, Alfie?
Yeah, it's similar. Lorne told me, we would use a team, and he was going to recommend me and Max. And again, I thought, okay, cool. Let's see what people say. Let's see what text I receive in 6 months from now. It didn't really feel real because I'm such a
Right.
nobody. And then yeah, similar. I had a chat with McHugh, and he had just got off the most exhausting day on set. I think it was 10 p.m. But for both of us, we're both in the same time zone, and he really just spoke freely about where they're at and their process. And it wasn't an interview in inverted commas. It was more just chatting about the process. And I think we kind of vibed on how in this job, kind of maneuvering being tired and maneuvering the disillusionment and maneuvering the hard parts of the job is a big part of the job, and staying happy and motivated throughout that is one of the main things you've got to get right. So yeah, I spoke to him, and then kind of as the wheels got turning and Max got into London, we had this dinner with him and with McHugh and Tom Cruise and Randy, and that's when it really started to feel real. And I remember I got there like 5 minutes early in my Sunday's best, and then Tom got there 5 minutes early too. So it was, for like 5 minutes, it was just me and him and his very nice security guard, like just talking. So that was very surreal, and that's when it really felt real. And yeah, to answer one other part of your question, Kai, I was completely terrified.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
But as you got into it, it was a very nice kind of family environment. I mean, that edit team, we were all working on the same floor. I think they had been working together for like 5 years at that point. So,
Yeah.
It was a very welcoming family atmosphere. Eddie Hamilton, he creates such a nice vibe in his office. So, soon enough we were working away.
Yeah. That's incredible. So talk to me about, what were those first conversations with McHugh and Cruz about, like, I think the Mission Impossible franchise to me is one of the most interesting ones because It's encompassed so many different visions and sounds, you know, starting all the way back from the first one with De Palma and Elfman, and going to Hans and John Woo, and then you got, you know, JJ and Giacchino, and then, you know, Joe Kramer's amazing score with McHugh, and then of course Lorne coming in and kind of shepherding kind of this kind of more of an arc approach to it. So what were those first conversations like? And you know, you're inheriting a legacy of a very well-known franchise, Lalo Schifrin's incredible themes, and Lorne's kind of groundwork for what he was doing in Dead Reckoning. And um, how did you talk about approaching this, keeping that legacy also, but also adding your flavors, kind of as you know, musical stories as well? Did you find places to inject yourself, or was it more about just like, how do we land this giant plane, you know, and make sure that we're not messing anything up for the fans and for the feel of everything?
I think it was the best possible example of what we do as writers, where we just have to start. That is the
Mm.
hardest part. And then McHugh is so experienced that he's worked with he's worked with other composers, and he's worked with writers, and he's worked with actors. So he knows that the process takes time. So we would just start writing. He would find things that he liked, and he would lead us down all these different roads for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then after a few weeks and months, the vision starts to become clear, and we
Mm.
didn't even decide on it because it just works. And we walked in. I think both Alfie and I had an idea. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alfie. Like what we wanted the score to be, but I think very quickly you realize that doesn't really matter. It's just about writing music that the director responds to. That's
Yeah.
it. And it can be fast or slow or emotional or intense. And so long as it works for him and he responds to it, then that becomes the sound of the score. So that really does the work for you in that way, at least with McHugh, that which was made it way easier on us.
Yeah, yeah, no, agreed. And you know, there is a danger in reading scripts or reading the book of a show that's you know, reading the book that's based on it, because you know, you start scoring something in your head that isn't the film. We
Right.
read the script kind of in our first week there, and I read the scripts and I was still like, okay, you know, it has very little relation to the magnificent, you know, spectacular thing they shot, and it is impossible. It would have been impossible to derive that from just reading the script. So, you know, and McHugh, he kind of thinks like a writer, I think, because he gives you these very broad emotional briefs. It's not direct. It's not a commercial brief where it's like, it needs to be punchy, it needs to be this. It
Yeah.
was quite broad, and the film was vast and long, and they hadn't really found the tone. You know, we didn't come at the end of their creative process. We kind of came in the middle. They were still shooting lots. They were still figuring out lots. So we kind of went through that process with them, and really, you know, started to slowly hone in on what, you know, the film was going to be and what the score was going to be. Um, but yeah, it was we were casting a very wide net creatively, uh, you know, for at least the first kind of whole quarter of the whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
fun. There were highs and lows because, you know, the wins
Yes.
were big and the losses were
I'm
big.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure. I, you know, it's funny because I've been doing these like kind of liner notes with Hans and on a lot of his scores recently, and going way back, we did one for The Ring, and Gore Verbinski was part of that chat, and he was talking about how like when they were working on, I forget if it was, I think it was Weatherman, and they were just like, yeah, you know, the film becomes its own, not to overuse the word entity because, but you know, I'm sure you guys are
Yeah.
familiar with the entity, but the
Yeah.
film becomes its own entity, becomes its own
Yeah.
living being, and then you go, okay, what do you need? What does the film need? What is it asking for? And you're just trying to give what the movie is, no longer about what you want to do. It's like what the film needs.
Mm.
And I think that's the cool part of the creative process because everyone is working for the film. And
Yeah, but
so
to do that, you have to let go of things as well, and that's
yeah,
difficult. You have to
yeah.
wave goodbye to things that you thought was going to be the film, you know. So that's part of it as well.
And talk to me about, you know, of course you have this incredible, one of maybe one of the most famous themes of all time. I mean, everyone knows the Mission Impossible theme. Anyone can
Yeah.
hum it when you just say it. What was it like getting to take that precious Lalo Schifrin theme and get to play with it and break it down and find different variations and create builds and create textures with it because it's so much part of the DNA of the score, and you don't want to. And knowing you guys come from Lawrence school where he just embraces those classic themes in the best way possible. I mean, he never shies away on whether it's Mission Impossible, Bad Boys, Beverly Hills
Mm.
Cop. A lot of composers might say, let's just get that out of the way and do something, new. Of course, Mission Impossible, a little bit more iconic than the rest, but what was it like tackling that? And was it did you feel like this is too precious, or do you feel like, oh, we can play with this, we can break it apart and just really find ways to make it work?
It is the best possible assignment as a composer to be able to write theme and variations based on Lala's theme. There couldn't be a better assignment. And we were constantly amazed at how can we come up with yet another version of Mission? And yet we did for basically the whole year up until the very end. So it just shows that as you work and find ideas, McHugh will say, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? And then Cecile Turnisac will take a stem, our score producer, and then put it with a different piece, and she'll stretch it. And then she'll put it over this part of the film. And then all of a sudden, not only is there a new variation, there is a need and a desire for yet another new variation that will cover a scene that we couldn't even think that it would be used for.
Yeah.
And so it's just the most exciting collaborative way to work. So there was always a need for more, and we delivered it.
Yeah, naming all the previous, as you said just now, Kaya, kind of inheriting a legacy, that was, part of the nervousness I had going in, because you are. And all those other composers, they have proven there are millions of ways to do this, and especially when I saw Fallout, I thought, okay, right, they really are. This really doesn't have to be a kind of heisty jazz score. You can do something else.
Yeah.
And it can still feel like Mission and give it that fun and uplifting kick. So, yeah, there are no rules. And, having such a recognizable theme cracks a big part of the code. To establish that is one of the biggest parts of our job, really. But again, there's an extra challenge on being fresh and interesting. I got to give a lot of credit to McHugh. He had great musical ideas. He encouraged us to find the strange sounds you hear in the submarine.
Yeah.
He encouraged us to go and use voices and encourage us with the biplane to, go classic and cool. So, yeah, it really impressed me how much he understood music, and not in the way a musician would with chords and scales, but just as someone who loves film music and has such a strong grasp on film music styles. He really helped us a lot there.
Yeah, and first of all, I can't believe I haven't said it yet, but the score is fantastic. Like it is so great, and it's not just kind of blanket orchestral action. Like you guys found a way to give it a personality, and I love the use of different textures and elements, and the way it just moves, and the way the set pieces work and the action builds, but also the emotion of it. I grew up Jerry Bruckheimer action movies where the action was so melodramatic and big, and the stakes were so high. And maybe today's audiences might go, well, this is just too whatever, big or cheesy. But I'm like, man, shower me in that stuff. Like I want to feel those emotions, like.
Well, thank you, Kaya.
Yeah. So you guys did such an amazing job in landing that, not just the action impact, but the emotional impact on that. And was when you're doing that and you're trying to find that, and you're talking about kind of they didn't find the tone yet and stuff like that. I mean, it must have been, what was the process like of playing around, failing, succeeding, and getting the feedback from McHugh and getting, that collaborative process? Is that where the joy in the job is, or is that where the terror in the job is?
I think my favorite part of the job was after 6 weeks up until we were very busy at the end. So I think for a solid 8-9 months, the best part was having these wins and losses and figuring out the movie together as a team.
Yeah.
That was so exciting because it almost became a rhythm where we would have maybe one success and then 2 steps back, and then 1 week we'd land a few things, and we would learn the film together, and McHugh would get excited, and that would get us excited. That was the best part of the process, or my favorite part, because it was so rewarding, and I felt like I was learning as a musician, and as a film composer. How do you make a score from the ground up? We
Mm.
first watched the film when it was 4 hours long with no music. That was the assembly cut at the beginning. That was scary, thinking, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do? This is gonna be hard." But finding our rhythm and finding our way, that I think was my favorite part of the process.
Yeah. Alfie, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, we've in all the various messages of from even McHugh and Cecile, the word tireless has come up quite a lot because it was tireless. You had to find the energy to do the thing you have done 5 times again, uh, and you had to sit down and kind of empty your mind and just try and what could it be now? And yeah, as I just said earlier, the wins were big, the highs were high, and the lows were low. We would have music sat in the Avid for weeks, and then for whatever reason we would fall out
Yeah.
of love with it because
Hmm.
maybe this scene got shorter, maybe the scene is in another part of the film, maybe we are now insecure that the film is becoming too sad or too whatever.
Mm,
So I think it was a process that demanded a lot of material from us. We had to keep kind of throwing paint at the canvas, so we'll be ready for whatever bit of progress is made. And
Yeah.
and sometimes we had to wait for the edit to get better, and for them to get along with their process, and then they were ready for a cue. Sometimes they weren't ready for a cue, so yeah, we just had to keep going,
Yeah, and
the
I
whole
mean,
time.
action filmmaking is the most difficult because the cut is always changing. I mean,
yes.
from a frame here to a frame there to a whole sequence, and it's all about timing. And then the editors are probably pulling their hair out more so than because they're trying to
Yes.
find the right. It just has to feel right, and it's all about instinct. And I know
Yes.
and you talked about those final few months being really busy, and I'm sure that's just like conforming and making sure things work because especially with a film like this, the score is such a big backbone. So if there's no
Yes.
sync between image and sound, then everything kind of gets lost. So it's funny. I interviewed Powell a while ago, and I forget about what movie he was talking about, but he was like, "Oh yeah, I always anticipate I try to like pre-anticipate the picture changes. So he'll like I'll write cues that work in different tempos so I can just, speed it up or slow it down without having to do much changes. So I'm curious, like, was there any prep work to like, okay, this is going to be an action film, the changes are coming. Was there a way to prep for that, or was it just like we're gonna just have to tackle things as
Mm.
they come and just, do the work that needs to be done?
There was no way to prep for it. And the proof of that is even in the very last weeks where we had recorded a bunch, we were still rewriting a bunch. We were writing new stuff even a few days before Printmaster. That was a good one. Um, but we would be at the studio. Alfie and I would be there writing. Cecile would be at air producing the sessions, listening to every pass and giving notes while they're recording. McHugh would be at the dub stage, and we would get a note from him about a cue that we hadn't thought about in months. So there was no planning or prepping for anything. It was
Wow.
impossible. Truly, mission
Truly,
Yeah,
impossible.
truly.
yeah.
And you just had to roll with the punches. You'd get a text from Eddie saying, "We're at the stage, and McHugh doesn't like how this chord lands there." We're like, okay. Oh, I thought that scene was approved seven
Yeah.
months ago. But then look, you've got Cecile and Timmery Duplat and Sarah Walsh, great music editors, and we're all working as a team. And let's say Timmery will be able to handle that while she's on the stage sitting next to McHugh, and then a new cut comes in for reel two, and it's like, oh my God, we have to, remove two beats from this bit that's that I thought was fine. It's
Yeah.
very dynamic and very exciting.
Tireless is the word again.
Hmm.
Yeah. But what was
But
it like?
I don't mean that in a negative way because it was a
No, not at all. That's
proper
part of it. I
film
mean, that
music
is
adventure. Yeah. One of the last scenes of the film, I won't be saying any spoilers when I say this, but it has the mission theme in it. And I mean, that was a Tom Cruise idea very, very late. We did the fix and then sent it to the orchestrator on the morning of the last woodwind session of the whole thing.
Wow.
and I was in a cab on the way to the session. And when I got there, they were recording it, having we had finished it about 3 hours before. um, so yeah, and it was kind of unpredictable to the point where, as Max said, you got to roll with the punches. And I think once McHugh found his tone of the film and really stripped down all the stuff they didn't need, then you have to really commit to the tone and make it as good as possible, which means giving a hell load of notes to everyone. Every department went through a version of what we're describing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we all banded together and made it work.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's the big thing is that it takes a village to get this, to land the plane and everything. And what, I'm sure you've worked on scores where the budget is this and it's just you doing everything. What was it
Yeah.
like to manage a giant team like this? I'm sure you had the resources, the biggest resources you've ever had in your careers up to this point, having the orchestra, having orchestrators, music editors. What was it like keeping, I guess, the big picture of everything in your head? Because you're talking about doing all these little fixes. It's a behemoth of a film. You're managing a team. You're managing just the overall arc of the score as well. Uh, how did you, I guess, multitask all of this in your creative brains, but also in kind of just the management side of your brains as well?
Well, luckily we had the leadership of Cecile Turnisak, our score producer. So with her and the way that McHugh trusts her, that made everything possible. Without that, it wouldn't be possible because you need to operate on so many different parts of the film in one day or even in 1 hour. So there needs to be trust between everybody.
Yeah.
And organization has to be top notch. My guys, Smith and Logan, back in LA, who were on the film for a super long time, are helping manage all these different moving parts as we're recording and stemming and mixing. And additionally, Kayun at Paramount, who was our main contact, is helping us. Okay, how do we book all this? And her colleague Michaela were texting, how do we make sure we get this in time before the dub ends? And I really have to say that throughout the whole process, I felt so supported and I never felt nervous about what are we going to do if we don't do this in time. I knew that would happen so that Healthy and I could focus on, okay, we need to rewrite this scene and our job is to write. So we need to write. And we had to block out all of that stuff. And there were very few times when I felt at least where I was like, oh boy, what are we going to do? But for the better portion of a year, there were incredible people working on the project. So, your question is a great one, but they're pros at Paramount. They've seen this before, and they knew that they were all there working together with us. So thank you to them.
Yeah. I mean, Cecile really was the hinge point for so much of this, of what we're describing. We've been so grateful for her, and she's a hardened warrior now. She's done 4 huge films with McHugh. Not easy films. So as Max said, having him trust her so much, and then she's worked with the mixers before, she's been in the dub with these people before. We had a lot of kind of love and protection from them and Cecile and Paramount, and we were very much protected so we could just keep our heads down, really. It was a unique situation and one we're very, very grateful for. It wouldn't have happened without all of that working.
It's such and that's what amazes me about like getting these like giant projects done. And I think I remember watching behind the scenes on one of Bay's Transformers films, and he was like, "Oh yeah, every premiere was a different cut of the film. Like it was like the Tokyo premiere was different from the LA premiere, which was different from the London premiere, and then of course the final cut was in the theaters." And I'm just like, I can imagine just the team, going, and he said that like, "Oh yeah, every premiere is different." I'm the team behind everything going, "Oh God, we got to change everything,"
Wow.
keep going. Crazy. And it's these action films are such behemoths, and but they're so satisfying for audiences and the experience and why we go, why we fell in love with this medium. I think a lot of especially as when I was younger, those were the films that I really like. It was like, oh my God, you're feeling these emotions that you can't feel anywhere else. So
yes.
I'm curious, once you finished everything and you were able to finally just like, okay, everything is done, and you got to go to the first screening or the first premiere or whatever it was, that when you first saw the movie for the first time in its in entirety, what was a sequence that you could sit back and first of all, were you able to enjoy the film, not going having PTSD or panic attacks looking at certain sequences, but what was like your favorite sequence to look back on and go, holy, like wow, look at the music and look at that moment soar, and like were there any like favorite sequences or set pieces that you got to write and go and see the final product and go, wow.
I saw the film for the seventh time in its completion on Sunday. So, and I can confidently say most of the times I had different feelings watching it. The first time was at the Printmaster. There were still watermarks on the screen, and I thought, okay, I'm still hearing these little things here and there that I was thinking about doing something differently, but it's done now. Then the time after that was the cast and crew. So sitting with a bunch of colleagues, and I heard less of those moments. And then the third, fourth, and fifth times were all premieres. So that was Cannes, London, New York. And that was exciting to see with people all dressed up. Everyone's thrilled. There's still a lot of people who worked on the movie there, though, at all these. Then we had Paramount. Again, a lot of people worked there, but there were friends and family, so everyone was thrilled to see it. I had like 40 people there that I invited. It was awesome to see people I hadn't seen in a year. And then Sunday was I saw it at the Chinese theater, and so that was with civilians and people who were just excited to see it who didn't work on it.
You bought tickets to go see it, yeah.
And I brought my parents and some very close childhood friends, so it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I think the seventh time was, I think, my favorite because I got to experience it with people who were experiencing all for the first time. Yeah. Everyone's glued to the screen. Everyone's engaged. People are laughing and at the comedy moments, and they're thrilled at the thrilling moments. And to wrap this answer up, I think my favorite part, which I did feel and I think in all the other bits, was at the climax in the sky. And I won't say what it is for a spoiler, but that to me was like, this works, and I can sleep easy that night.
Yeah, each time you see it, you become less of a kind of technocrat and more of an audience member experiencing the film. And in the London premiere, my mum, who sat next to me, my proud mother, she was following every beat and really laughing at the bits you were meant to.
Yeah.
And she doesn't see a lot of these kind of popcorn movies, you could say. And she loved it. She absolutely loved it. And that was real touching moment for me, because okay, this is actually a good film. People are going to like this. And we are now speaking at the end of its opening weekend, which was a huge success, I'm very, very happy for, McHugh and everyone involved. So that's
the biggest opening of the franchise. Like, congratulations. That's incredible.
Thank you, Kai.
That's very, very significant. Those guys, huge risks involved to shoot what they shot.
Yeah, it's just that filmmaking spirit. It just comes to life on the screen, and I love that. Yeah, I my first job before I moved out, I used to work at a movie theater, and I was a projectionist, and I would always so I would always this is like back in the summers when like Batman Begins came out and like Dark Knight and all those. I got to work those midnight premieres, and I'd always would because I've been in focus group screenings, and when an audience knows they're being questioned, they were probably watching in a different lens, but when you're just seeing people who bought tickets. And I would always pop in to see if the same jokes would hit. Like, were they laughing at the same spots? Were they, you just see how an edit can work and how a cut can work on an audience. And then, my first experience, I got to sit in a theater seeing my first screen credits just recently was with the Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, and The Day the Earth Blew Up, the Looney Tunes movie. Even though I was not creatively working on the film, I was in the credits for the overhead for the studio, but just to sit there with friends and watch it, even though I'd seen it, 5, 6, 7 times, and see other people reacting, laughing at the jokes or certain, or getting, caught up in the moment. It is such an amazing experience because your brain kind of like migrates to their brain and you get to watch it in a different lens. It's hard to to describe, but you finally can get out of your own head and just see it as an audience member. But
Yeah, I mean, which is basically impossible to do while you're working on it. You know, if you're
Yeah.
on that last 10% of the process, it's very hard to keep that first impression, you know, strong and valid and authentic. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, well, guys, I mean, congratulations again. Like you did it. You,
Thanks, Kaya.
Thank
got
you.
what an amazing accomplishment. You landed the plane. It's at the airport. It's docked at the gate,
Yes.
and
Thank God.
you can let go of the steering wheel and let the
Yeah.
and look back at this thing, and hopefully, once you get some distance from it, it's still going to grow warm and warm and warm for you.
Yes.
What an amazing accomplishment, you guys' career, and and I've been listening to your guys' music since you started, and it's just what an incredible honor for me just to relish in your music. So yeah, thank you again.
You.
Thank you, Kaya. And
Thank you
I've
for
always
doing these
loved
talks.
chatting with you. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, for a lot of aspiring composers and like film music lovers, these interviews are so important. They're worth it.
Yes.
So
Appreciate it. Yeah, I love talking with you guys. You guys are the best to talk with. So
yeah.
Thanks, Kaya.